Welcome to the Think Christian podcast, where we talk about faith and pop culture because there's no such thing as secular. I'm Josh Larson, senior producer over at thinkchristian.net. So I've been getting a little squirrely waiting for this new mixtape from Chance the Rapper. It's supposed to be out any day, but we've been hearing that for quite a while now. It does come on the heels of 4 singles that he's released since March, which has only whet our appetites. In an attempt to will that mixtape into existence, I asked TC contributor Claude to join me and cheer on Chance, I guess, help him get that music across the finish line. We're going to discuss where Chance the Rapper is at right now in his career and what we make of this new music. If my plan works, he'll probably drop that mixtape the day after we publish this episode. Either way, I hope you enjoy our conversation about one of the most theologically intriguing artists in hip hop today, Chance the Rapper. I'm very happy to have Claude back on the podcast. So, Claude, I already congratulated you on your Boston Celtics winning the NBA championship. Not who I was rooting for, but that's okay. So, tell me what else you've been up to besides celebrating with your kids this summer.
I mean, the Celtics winning the title was a big highlight. My boys are old enough to stay up late and watch some of the games, so it was some great core memories that were made. So that was a big win. I would say my other summer highlight, we got a chance to head down to Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, and it was just really nice. It was it was a great beach experience. My favorite part of it, of the beach experience was, had all the amenities that you love about the beach, but none of the headaches. So the parking was simple. It was right up on the beach.
Wow.
It was not super crowded. It was perfect. So, maybe I shouldn't share that here on the podcast because all our listeners are going to go there next summer. But yeah, shout out to Atlantic Beach in North Carolina and some good friends, friends of a friend. And they helped make that happen for us. So, always fun to see people being generous with the things that they have. So we're definitely blessed by that. So big highlight.
Sounds lovely. I mean, an unchaotic beach in the summer, no less. Wow. That's a rare thing. Glad you guys had that. One thing that'll make, I think, both of our summers even better, though, Claude, if Chance the Rapper would just release this mixtape that he's been promising for a while now. As we do wait for this, we were talking about this. We thought we'd get together and maybe just consider the state of Chance a little bit. He is one of our favorite artists here at Think Christian, not only for his immense musical ingenuity and talent, but also for the exuberant way he's carried his Christianity since breaking onto the hip hop scene. We've been following him at TC since his 2016 mixtape called Coloring Book. And I wanted to bring back what Xavier Ramey wrote about at the time here at Think Christian. He said, Chance the Rapper dared to produce music that was made to uplift and encounter the Black experience in a uniquely positive manner, to explore what it means to be steadfast and survive not because of your city or country, but in spite of it. And he even, like Kendrick Lamar, spoke of God's role in this process. So other Chance coverage at TC, we did a lot when his 2019 studio album came out, The Big Day. Catherine Freeman and I talked about it on this podcast under the biblical theme of covenant. Believe it or not, that was episode 14. And then, wow. Claude, sounds crazy. You wrote about The Big Day for the website. You examined the ways it explored the idea of God's providence. So I think, the color, like The Big Day, I should say, Coloring Book, they were both joyful recordings, largely celebrations. I think The Big Day you could describe as a celebration of Chance's marriage at the time in particular. And then since then, we've gotten a few singles here and there. This year, though, came some sad news. Along with new music. First, Chance and his wife announced in early 2024 that they were going to divorce. Then in the last few months, we've gotten 4 singles, and these are all in anticipation of this new mixtape called Starline Gallery. I think that's still what it's expected to be called, which, as I said, we're still waiting for. So, Claude, a general question for you first, before we dig into those tracks that we've gotten. What is the Chance vibe for you right now, kind of both personally, where you're at, and maybe what do you perceive the vibe to be out there in the wider culture? Are you ready for a comeback? Does he seem ready? Is comeback even the right word to use?
It's interesting, I think he has this interesting arc. He sort of kind of ascended seemingly out of nowhere. He had some mixtapes that were kind of popping, before Coloring Book, Acid Rap in 10 Days. And so he was sort of bubbling. And then he kind of ascended in 2016 and received critical acclaim. And then from there, it's sort of been a descent, I think, in a lot of ways. The Big Day, a lot of people did not like it. They felt it was sort of too happy-go-lucky, too like happy newly married dad rhymes. They didn't like the sound. Felt he was kind of getting away from his production. And he had some real kind of drama and conflict with his previous manager as well. So a lot of moving pieces there. And so I think because of that, the state of Chance right now is sort of like a question mark. It's I think he's kind of forgotten in terms of kind of key figures in hip hop. It's Drake, for a moment, and then Kendrick, and Chance has sort of been on the sideline, so to speak. I think the diehards are hoping, hey, just return to kind of, what we've loved about your music. And that'll, I think lead us into some of these singles. But I think on a broader scale, I think he's kind of just forgotten. And, you can hear it a little bit in some of the singles. There's a sense of, okay, I need to kind of redeem myself or sort of prove that I am, still an artist that is doing significant creative work. But I think right now the state is kind of a state of forgottenness and a sort of maybe a little bit of ambivalence too.
Yeah, which is too bad. Just thinking back on all the excitement that was around Coloring Book and kind of this culmination of what others maybe who knew him earlier felt was coming, and to see it arrive, and to think just that that would be built upon in some way or expanded or enriched even, not even necessarily in terms of stardom, but just artistic exploration. That's an interesting phrase to use, happy-go-lucky, because as I said, it was this sense of joy that he carried that drew so many people to him. And I think there was a theological element to that that a lot of Christian fans of hip hop particularly appreciated. But that's not all there is to the Christian experience. And this isn't to say that's the only thing Chance explored. A track like I Might Need Security is very much sort of more about the way we have been failed by government, and a protest song, really. So Chance has done other stuff, but this happy-go-lucky tag, I think, has stuck with him. And if we turn to these four new tracks, there's one I'm a little conflicted about them, Claude. So I'm hoping you can help me out with, because the one I am drawn to the most is Together, which is happy-go-lucky. As you said that phrase, I was like, oh man, that sounds like a way you could describe Together. It's this ode to having extended family ties and the nostalgia over that, and having a home base for the family and the good that it provides. There's stuff in there too about underserved communities have to really struggle to claim that and to preserve that. So it's not entirely happy-go-lucky. But then I stop myself and like, well, I want Chance to grow. Like, should I be drawn more to something like Buried Alive, which is a tune that sounds a little differently musically, but also is exploring some of those struggles you alluded to. So there's a mix of stuff here in these four songs alone. Where are you at listening to these? And we should say they didn't come all out at once either, right? There was like a couple weeks, if not a month or more, between each one. So it's not like we got these as a batch to consider as a whole. But now that we have four, just more generally before we dig into the tracks, is that question mark been answered anymore to you by these four tracks?
Well, it's interesting, because we're talking about, artists, Chance releasing singles, and we want to see the whole project. And, singles are interesting, kind of phenomena in this time of era of streaming, where we don't necessarily think so much about albums. In previous generations, you release a single, kind of generate buzz and see what sticks. And I do get the sense, though, that's sort of maybe what Chance is doing, is kind of, here's a song that kind of represents this side of me, and this is what I'm working on. And here's another that represents another side of me. And sort of, I wonder if there's kind of like a measuring of how things are resonating as they're being released, because I think you can see
Interesting.
different elements of the kind of the Chance kind of musical palette, represented in these singles. And I do wonder if there's a sort of if there's a sense in which he's kind of trying to find or trying to demonstrate, hey folks, like I'm back, and
Yeah.
he's going back to some of those certain flavors. So I think there's my sense is behind these singles, I have a feeling he's trying to show, hey, the things that y'all have loved about me, they're still here. And here's the new form, the new iteration of them. And I think you can see that represented in each of the singles, maybe in a little bit, in a certain way.
Okay. That's an interesting idea. I'm not sure if this is what's happening, but if these are being dropped to kind of test what's resonating with people and letting that maybe form what the
Yeah, I
mixtape or
wonder.
whatever we get
Yeah.
comes, what that looks like. I don't know. Maybe that is a little bit something that's happening. So is there one of these four that jumped out at you where it was especially exciting or especially illuminating in some way among them?
So together, um, this is the one that you mentioned, right? Just a few moments ago. This is the one that has that could be labeled under that happy-go-lucky tag that I mentioned. I think it avoids that though. I don't think this is the happy-go-lucky criticism that people levied at the big day. And I would probably push back on some of that criticism of the big day. And people can see my review as well.
Hmm.
I think I think together, as you mentioned, it's a nostalgic song. It's something that we've seen from Chance before. We've seen it early on in the big day. We've seen it on some of his other projects. We've seen it on Color Book. He's rapping about family. He's rapping about struggles. He's rapping about overcoming, and he's rapping about finding joy and kind of comfort in the moments where materially you may not have a lot, but you have people who love you around you, and that's more than enough. And to me, that is Chance doing one of the things that he does best, which is sort of like an uplifting nostalgia, kind of like a sacred remembrance. And because there's a depth there, it's not just kind of like happy for the sake of happy. It's like happy in the midst of struggle. And you could imagine how somebody who maybe had hit the top, commercially and has kind of crashed in a lot of ways, how going back to those moments of remembrance, family wise, could be a real comfort to him. And I think that comes through in the music, in a way that's really sincere. So that's the one I think that probably stands out to me the most.
Yeah. And as you're talking, this idea of seeking what's of value beyond material wealth, very gospel oriented perspective there. Think of Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount and other places about that and setting aside, the possessions of this world. And there is that activist streak to Together as well. The repeated CBA. I had to like look that up, like community benefits agreement. Okay. So he's rapping about these
Yeah.
essentially these are plans to assist small businesses or job seekers in these economically depressed areas. So at the same time, it's not a call. The happy-go-lucky, I think, is not fair because it suggests that it's calling for a blind eye to struggles,
That's
and I
right.
don't think that Chance
That's
has
right.
ever
It's
done
not.
that. And I
No.
think right, and there's
Yeah.
by the CBA bit here, it's like, okay, while we are understanding what's of value and what we want to preserve, we're still not going to like sit back and not fight against some of the injustice that is happening unfairly to our families, to our neighborhoods. Like we're going to be active against that. So yeah, Together does strike that balance nicely.
The
Um,
other the other part about Together, I think is interesting. I wanted to double check before I mentioned it because I kind of have some of these blurred in my mind a little bit. But Together, he is produced by DJ Premier, hip hop legend, and it's interesting because Chance isn't the only rapper who has gone to DJ Premier when in need of sort of like a single to kind of revive your momentum in kind of the hip hop consciousness. So I think in that sense it is a nice blend of kind of he's getting a hip hop legend who's providing him, I think, a really neat true hip hop kind of style production in a sense with a nice sample and all this sort of stuff. And he's kind of in Chances like talking about, a genuine struggle and family and overcoming in ways that people appreciate. So I think to me, this is sort of a single where he's going for it, right? He's like, I know this is what this is kind of who I am. This is who people have seen me as musically, and I'm giving them that. Whereas on the big day, I think a lot of people felt like, well, this is a sharp U-turn, what's
okay.
happening. And I think in a
Yeah.
lot of senses, bringing DJ Premier, this kind of, sacred kind of remembrance nostalgia is Chance. And to me, it strikes me as an attempt to return to his roots.
Interesting. Okay. So you mentioned sampling there, and I wanted to call out another sample that I loved, which is on the track I Will Be Your, and then in parentheses, Black Star Line Freestyle. It's this from Stephanie Mills' Don't Stop Doing What You Do, a 1981 R&B song. And it's just so crucial to kind of the lilt and the rhythm of this song, I Will Be Your. And it's not only the music that excited me there. This is maybe of the four the most new sound I felt a little bit. I don't know, you would know better than me, but certainly it sounded newer than something like Together. And in the title there you have Black Star Line, a reference to Marcus Garvey's shipping line, which was intended to bring goods and people between America and Africa. This was in the early 1900s. And I'm wondering between, what's going on and talked about in this song, the fact that the mixtape was at one point and maybe still titled Starline Gallery, and then a fourth song here is called Stars Out. Listening to I Will Be Your Black Starline Freestyle, I'm envisioning this conceptual project that he seems to be circling around with some of these songs, touching on Black Star Line, but also bringing to it elements of Afrofuturism. There's like a spaceship motif going on with it.
That's right.
So I'd love to hear what you think of this song and about the possibility of this like larger project that might be at work as well.
I think with this one, I Will Be Your, the Black Star Line Freestyle, I think this is, again, if Chance is trying to approve his bona fides again, right? And also do so while showing new growth. I think this is a track where he's showing like, hey, I can rap. Like, don't forget I can rap. Like he's really lyrically, he's moving. His flow is nimble, is sharp, clever wordplay. As you mentioned, the production is kind of a higher tempo. So like he's keeping up, like all that sort of stuff. So to me, if Together is showing, is Chance showing fans like I still have soul, like I'm still me. Here he's showing like, hey, my skills are still sharp. Like I'm not rusty. Like I can rap with the best of them. And so I like this song quite a bit. And I think you're right. I think there's you can see elements of kind of like a concept album, the spaceship. You see the same thing in the Buried Alive video, the kind of this sort of spaceship futuristic element. And it's interesting how many artists, when they hit a point of sort of dissent or significant trial or challenge artistically, how much they move toward sort of leaving the country, seeing new territory, expanding their horizons. I think Dave Chappelle is a decent parallel for Chance in this way. Someone who had a lot of success, and then he kind of saw what was happening and was like, I'm pulling back. I know, and Chappelle spent time in Africa. Chance has done the same. He's spoken about going to Ghana and seeing his family roots and doing work and things there. And I know that's a little bit of his story as well. Same with the Marcus Garvey elements. So it's interesting, to see how do artists kind of find themselves when they hit a critical low, and then how do they kind of reemerge? And I think they're looking, Chance it strikes me as he's looking for something unifying, something larger, right, to situate his work and his music in. And I think that's where you're getting a lot of those themes. So this single, I think, is really strong, but it's no surprise to me to see Chance kind of getting maybe a little bit weirder, bringing in the spaceships, doing all that stuff. I feel like this is kind of what artists do. Like, hey, I'm trying to find myself. So, I'm going to take up, painting and all this sort of stuff. And I think that's what he's doing. And, he's, I don't say that out of sort of mockery or anything. It's just I think we've seen that pattern before. But again, these artists they're so gifted, they're so talented. Like they have to challenge themselves. And I think as listeners, we have to be comfortable with artists growing and changing and evolving, right? Like just as we need to give ourselves, grace in our journey as our discipleship to Jesus grows and evolves and changes, there's a way to do that. And, you keep walking with Jesus, keep being who you are, but things develop. And I think, we're seeing Chance do that in real time. So no surprise to see spaceships in the mix.
Well, and he's always been, there's always been a nerdy element to him, right? And there's this is the Harry Potter stuff, and we get Harry Potter references again on a couple of these songs. So, yeah, that's not entirely shocking that there's a little bit of that sort of stuff. You mentioned Buried Alive, and that's probably the one that mostly directly addresses some of the challenges, some of the difficulties, and he does so in an interesting way. The video, very literal. He's busting out of a casket in a sense, and there's a certain amount of responsibility, it sounds like, taken in this song. There are phrases like shot off his high horse, called out his arrogant lies, both of which he's referring to himself there, but also again bringing this full circle to this sort of positivity, or this in this case seeking out of joy. He talks about finding new life in songwriting, and this speaks to what you were saying about artists growing too, and references as well how that has come as a blessing from God. There's a phrase here, got to give the Lord thanks, and I love this where he kind of comes to this conclusion: not yet tired, but I might be sore. It's a song where there's a bruised sense to it, which, nicely kind of sets the table for all of this new work that we've gotten so far, and hopefully the stuff that we'll get yet. But yeah, what'd you think of Buried Alive?
I thought Buried Alive musically maybe is not my favorite, but I think in terms of its themes and sort of the lyricism, as you're pointing out, I think is the most interesting, because he is directly addressing the challenges he's had professionally and personally over the last couple of years, and the backlash that he's received towards his music. And so I think for that reason, it's really noteworthy that he actually tackles that head on.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways that's you can see that when he's rapping about his pen and his music being important for him, like he really means that, because he made this song to kind of confront and process some of these things. So I really commend him for that. I think the other part about Buried Alive that I think is significant, that I appreciate, is one of he has this short line of references where he mentions Jericho, Babylon, and Dagon.
Yeah.
And he's making reference to obviously biblical allusions. And I think especially Dagon, this is coming from the Old Testament, 1 Samuel 5, where the Ark of the Covenant is taken from the people to the Philistines, and placed in the presence of their idols and their gods. And they keep finding that Dagon, the Philistine idol, like keeps crashing and like bowing. Basically, they keep coming in, it keeps falling down to the ark, right? And it's this sort of moment where Israel has failed, but there's this sort of surprising reversal, right? This sort of redemption that's happening, this triumphant deliverance that's actually going to lead to the ark being returned to the people, because its presence is going to bring judgment on the unbelievers and for their wickedness and all this sort of stuff. So the fact that Chance refers to that, and Jericho, right, this marching around, playing the trumpet 7 times in victory, I think he's speaking in the language of redemption, and I think he's recognizing this. To me, is sort of this kind of like, yeah, everything has gone wrong, but like I believe from dire circumstances can come triumphant deliverance, right? And that's the reversal of the gospel. That while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, and our worst moments are not the final moments, right? Or the last word. So I love that, and there's the Buried Alive, obviously he gets up, there's death, resurrection themes, all that sort of stuff. So I really admire that he's willing to like confront these things musically, and make that known. So, and I find that theme just really fascinating, that, he seems to really believe that actually through his artistry, processing these things, he's going to experience that same sort of kind of redemption arc.
See, this is why I like to have, pastors, priests on, and Dagon went right past me. That the others, I was like, okay, I know where you're going. It's like, what? So thank you, Claude. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Anything else? We just had 4 songs to deal with here. I think we did a pretty good job of looking into them, but anything else you want to touch on before we sign off here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a larger question about this sort of that Chance is, just an example of a larger issue, which is, how do we respond to artists when they ascend quickly, and maybe we're disappointed with the project, and then they try to grow and kind of find themselves artistically. How do we respond to them? Can an artist make great music that we really enjoy in a certain way and style, and will we as fans permit them to branch out and do something really different, and sort of, is that Is that failure? Is that an artist selling out? Is that an artist, losing their way? Or is that just people change? He got married, he made an album about being really happy about it, and people didn't like it. People really didn't like it, but should somebody stay the same for the entirety of their career? Should they keep making
Yeah.
the same type of music in the same way? Or can we dignify our artists and let them change and grow? Still can be critical of, and evaluative about the music, but is it okay for artists to change? And is it okay for an artist to start and ascend in a really dramatic fashion, but then just sort of be a niche artist too? Is that okay? I think we believe stuff has to be up and to the right so much that I think we make it really hard for artists to kind of find their way in their place. So I think Chance is an example of maybe just even thinking more about, what should we expect of our artists in such a way that, they can explore and make music and not feel like, they're beholden to all of our expectations. So I don't have any answers to that, but that's the other thing I think is really interesting about the arc of Chance's career.
Yeah, and it's helpful to think about how do we measure artists as well. It's not the chart necessarily, but what are they exploring? And I think with musical artists, this is particularly um, poignant because they share so much of their own story. Often they do in their songs, like we hear in something like Buried Alive. And so, yeah, if they seem to be exploring in a fruitful way that doesn't reclaim that fame or the chart topping, maybe that's good enough. Maybe that's a countercultural way of looking at art that isn't, again, it kind of goes back to that material possession things. It may not be materially at the top, but maybe it is artistically richer. And maybe that's what we'll get if we ever get this mixtape from Chance the Rapper.
Yep,
we will see.
Yeah. Yep. And I think, people will just, if he blesses us with an offering, tracks, I think people at this point, people can take it and appreciate it for what it is. And maybe that's the best place to be in.
There you go. All right, before you go, Claude, I need to check in on the book progress. So fill me in on that and maybe let folks know not only what it is, but if they're interested, where they can follow you to kind of go along on this journey.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Turning in the manuscript in August 2024, so about a month from recording this, and it's tentatively titled "Word and Time." I can't remember what the subtitle is, but it's basically a weekly devotional, a weekly devotional through the church year. So if you're interested in kind of learning a little bit more church calendar and kind of how to keep time with Christ and with the church and being guided through that on a weekly basis, you could use it as a daily devo too. You'd be interested in this. So you can follow along with me on my Substack, Good Things, on Substack, or just search my name, Claude Acho, and you'll be in the loop with all the updates as they come.
There you go. All right. Well, all the best as you wrap that project up. Can't wait to see it out in the world. And thanks for doing this. Always good to talk to you. Okay, Claude?
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks.
We've spent a lot of time considering the work of Chance the Rapper here at Think Christian. In addition to the posts and the podcasts that I mentioned, we also wrote about his singles, I Might Need Security and First World Problems. We'll link to all of those in the show notes. Otherwise, you can find them pretty easily at thinkchristian.net just by searching for Chance the Rapper. Next up on the podcast, the latest Star Wars streaming series, The Acolyte. Joe George and Abby Olcese are going to join me for that. So maybe start watching if you haven't already. I'm about halfway through the season myself, and then you'll be ready for that conversation. If you have suggestions for other topics we should cover here on the podcast, you can always connect with us on Facebook and Twitter/X. Find us at Think Christian. Our email address is tcpodcast@thinkchristian.net in case you want to send us a note that way. And if you have a few kind words to share, maybe you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Star ratings are great. We'll take those too. But a review, some words, that really helps us reach new listeners. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can help us out by clicking that subscribe button. Maybe leave us a comment underneath this episode as well. Thank you in advance for doing any or all of that. The TC Podcast is a listener-supported production of Reframe Ministries, a family of programs designed to help you see your whole life reframed by God's gospel story. You can find more information at reframeministries.org. Our audio engineer and post-production supervisor is John Reeder. I'm Josh Larson. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to consider how another corner of our pop culture fandom connects with our faith.